Ms Lauder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Ms Lee for bringing this motion here today. It's quite a simple and straightforward motion about ensuring that our city streets are looked after and, as a consequence, our waterways are looked after. Street sweeping is an effective and simple way of ensuring that our community looks its best. Mr Assistant Speaker, street sweeping is vital to not only ensuring that our waterways remain clean, but helps our local Canberrans feel proud of their community. When you feel proud of where you live, you do more yourself to keep your community looking good. And I think it's a bit of a confusing message that we encourage people to report issues but then don't do something about it when we ask them to report street sweeping issues via Fix My Street. They can see that online, there's a whole range of issues that they can report. However, they're not included in the information you can see about your suburb. And that doesn't make much sense to me either, that all that information is collected there, but it's not available to the public to see. To me, it's a little bit like the accountability indicators that have been removed in this year's budget. When you're getting results that aren't very favourable, you make sure that the public don't see those results. It's along that same pattern. I received quite a few complaints from constituents about street sweeping, and it seems to come as a surprise to the government every autumn that the leaves are going to fall off the trees and settle onto the ground, in the gutters, on the streets, and indeed on the footpaths. And I think the Attorney General mentioned earlier about the courts project that, it was because of winter there was a delay. Well, again, that's perhaps no surprise. We've all probably know that winter is coming. In fact, it's already here, indeed, for the past few days. So that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. Autumn comes and winter comes. In fact, the Americans call winter fall for that very reason, because the leaves are going to fall to the ground. They do appear to be onto it. What does surprise me is that every year around this time, our inboxes get clogged with emails from people complaining about the street sweeping. In some areas, as Ms Lee has already commented, it's vastly exacerbated because of the types of trees that are planted in those suburbs. It's also worth noting that in those particular suburbs, mostly in Kurrajong, where many of the deciduous trees were planted before a different regime came in and we started planting different types of trees, it is the area that would be most visited by tourists and visitors to our city, and they see the mess that's created in our streets by the leaves that fall to the ground and then are left there. Doesn't sound like a lot to ask for additional street sweeping, but it can have a considerable impact and it can make a considerable difference to people's pride in their communities, their willingness to contribute their own effort to keep everything looking good, and the way that we view our communities and that other people visiting us view us as well. Just last week, as I'm often there, I was down at Lake Tuggeranong, and there's an area, whether you call it the gazebo area, the town square area, the laneways area. It goes from South Point, there's a pedestrian crossing from the main shopping centre, through to the lake. And just last night at Tuggeranong Community Council, there were people from the Directorate talking about potential works in that particular area. And most residents are enormously appreciative and looking forward to those changes. But the point was raised, as it has been every time there's discussion about the trees down Anketel Street and down the laneway precinct, about deciduous trees. When I was there just last week, there was rafts of leaves lying around against the edges of buildings and in the gutters because of the deciduous trees there, right on the edge of the lake. Where are those leaves going to end up? Either directly into the lake, into the water, or wash down through the stormwater system, also into the lake. As I'm sure you're aware, or hopefully many of you are aware, Lake Tuggeranong has one of the most significant problems with blue-green algae of all of our lakes in the ACT. So we all need to do what we can. But in those town square areas, or whatever you want to call them, it's not about residents who are going to go out and sweep it up. It's a local council or ACT government responsibility to ensure those areas are swept clean. Of course, I've talked about the leaves. Sadly, there's also other things that are left there, whether it's litter and all sorts of other things as well. That's why we pay our rates, to see these things done. Increasingly, we pay our rates at increasing amounts. We spend a lot of money, or this government spends a lot of money, encouraging constituents via advertising not to put things down the drain. And that is a good thing. It's a very positive thing. But people aren't necessarily putting leaves down the drain. We need to take action on that as a government to ensure that the leaves aren't going down the drain. So, I think about 2 weeks ago, the Minister went on Tim Shaw's 2CC breakfast show talking about upcoming spend in the budget. As we all know, the good news was all announced prior to the budget yesterday, and what we got in yesterday's budget was mostly the bad news about the increases in fees and charges. But when asked by Tim Shaw on the radio about TCCS using leaf blowers on windy days, the Minister laughed it off. Thought it was a bit funny, and she said they have a job to do and they have to work whatever challenges they face. Now, that is true, but, you know, someone in my family is a gardener and they do a lot of leaf blowing as well. They carry around a backpack-driven leaf blower because they move around to different sites, so it's not an electric plug-in thing. And they know that it's next to useless blowing leaves on a windy day. They blow back in your face. In fact, it's almost pointless blowing leaves when someone is mowing on the ride-on mower next to you, because that creates a little breeze of its own. So it is a bit of a wasted effort, and it's not a matter of ticking off, yes, we've blown the leaves at, you know, Tuggeranong Town Square today, when you go back an hour later and all those leaves are actually still there because the wind has blown them back. It's not a matter of working no matter what. It was a bit of, I thought, a bit of a dismissive attitude to the obvious concerns as to why we have this portfolio area that could be working a bit better. There doesn't seem to be the flexibility allowed in the Minister's directorate, and that comes down to poor planning and poor direction from this Minister. It's clear that if problems like this are a joke to the Minister, then she's out of touch with what Canberrans really want. Members of Transport Canberra and City Services shouldn't be made to be blowing leaves on a windy day. It is pointless. It's a tick-the-box issue. It's not actually achieving the outcomes that we expect from the government. It's a bit like something out of Fawlty Towers. Back nearly 5 years ago, I made my inaugural speech here in this chamber, and during that speech, I spoke about the need to get the basics right. I talked about roads, rates, rubbish and parking, the 3 R's and a P. Not that kind of a P. Unfortunately, Mr Assistant Speaker, in the past 5 years since I've been here, it's become clear that this government doesn't care about roads, rates, rubbish and parking. We see it over and over again. A lack of care or concern about local services, a lack of investment in local services. We've been starving this area, gradually reducing the funding so that this year, in the budget, we can say we're spending more, only by comparison to last year, not if you look at it over a period of a number of years. That's why I'm glad to stand here to support Ms Lee's motion. In fact, 2 years ago I did my own little experiment. I looked up my street sweeping schedule for the suburb I live in, and every day in chalk I wrote the date and took a photo of it. And my street was not swept during that month, or else the chalk in the gutter would have gone. And I wrote to the Minister about it, who said, oh, they were running a bit behind schedule. But why have a schedule? Why not update the schedule rather than have a fixed schedule that looks like it hasn't been updated for years. We need to get back to the basics. That's why I applaud Ms Lee on her motion today about providing better local services, and I commend her motion to the Assembly.
Question is the amendment to Ms Lee's motion be agreed to? Lee.